At some point or another, we've all had to take time off from playing the drums. Whether we notice any changes in our playing or our ability to play after these extended periods of time depends on a number of factors. These instances have left us all wondering, how long does it take to lose our skill as a drummer? Is it possible to forget how to play the drums? Well, today we're diving into some mental stuff, the psychology of learning and forgetting. Hey everybody, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer. This is a channel that is all about the non-glamorous drum stuff, the nitty-gritty tips and tricks of the trade. So if this is something you're interested in and this helps you out, I really hope you will subscribe. First off, a quick disclaimer, especially to you if you are new to the channel. This is not a science channel, this is a drumming channel, and I am not a psychologist. But I've spent a lot of time researching this topic because I think it's super interesting, and I've also had a lot of past experience with this, being a musician and a piano player and a drummer and a percussionist since 3rd grade. So I hope that all of us drummers and any kind of musician can learn something from this. Basically, our discussion here is going to be in 2 parts. First, I'm going to talk about just the general science of all of this. We'll talk about it from a general perspective. And then from there, we'll go into how this applies to us specifically as drummers. So let's get rolling here. The amount of time it takes to lose a skill is proportional to the amount of time it took to learn that skill. Let me give you a few examples. If you were to cram for a test the night before and you spend 2 hours studying for it before you just can't stay awake and you fall asleep, then you go take the test the next morning, chances are you're not going to get a good grade on that test because you crammed all that knowledge into your head in 2 hours and then you slept for like 5 hours and then got to school and took the test, and by then you'd actually forgotten a lot of it. That's the way our brains work. When we cram it in there in such a quick time, it very easily gets lost in there in that same amount of time. Or on the other side of all this, you learned how to read at a young age. You spent years getting better and better at reading and reading faster. Well, you could go the next 5 years without ever reading a single word, and you'll still be able to jump right back into it and know how to read. You're not going to forget that because you spent so many years of your life learning it. It would take a very, very long time to lose that skill. Or you might never lose it. Because really, certain skills that we learn early on in life will never be forgotten. With the exception of disease or anything debilitating, we'll always be able to write words on a page, ride a bike, read, do basic math, etc. But also, once a skill is well established, it can be relearned much more quickly. It might be rusty at first when you come back to it, but overall relearning that skill will be a much quicker process than it was originally learning it that first time. For instance, I'm 24 years old, so it's been like 6 or 7 years since high school, and I haven't done long division since high school. And most of you, if you're my age or older, you probably haven't done long division in a long time either. So right now, I would probably not be able to do it right. But I could relearn how to do that long division, and in a couple minutes, I'd be breezing through it again. Because I spent a lot of time really establishing that skill in high school, and so I could go back, and it might be a little rusty at first, but I could relearn it pretty quickly. I also experienced this firsthand recently with this very challenging marimba piece that I learned in college. There's actually a video, an old video here on the channel that I posted years ago of me playing this in my senior recital. The piece was called Red, the really cool marimba duet. I played it for my senior recital back in fall of 2014, and then I had an opportunity to perform it again in September of 2016, so almost 2 years later. So I went about 2 years without playing it at all, without thinking about it, and naturally it was pretty rusty as I got going, getting back into practicing it. But it only took a few hours of really working in these certain things and remembering certain parts that I had regained all the skill and I could play it just fine. It was way quicker to relearn it than it was originally. And that was still after 2 years because I spent so much time learning it and thoroughly learning that piece originally that it didn't take a lot of time to relearn it 2 years later. The relearning of a skill is enhanced by virtual reality. Now this is a mental virtual reality where your mind can relive and reenact a skill there in your mind without you actually doing the physical activity. Now this is something we're going to circle back around to when we start talking about the direct application to drums. It'll make more sense then. Generally, a person does not ever completely lose the skill they once had. However, the ability to finally execute that skill at a high level will deteriorate over time. For example, a former Major League Baseball player can still 20 years later pick up a bat and probably hit a ball just fine, but his ability to specifically, precisely hit that ball in such a way as to aim it right between second and third base or wherever he wants it to go, that skill is most likely deteriorated and he would have to regain that muscle memory and that precision to be able to do that again decades later. So along the lines of the sports discussion there, muscle memory and strength are the first part of the skill to be lost. The actual muscles and the muscle memory, as we call it, the ability to specifically control those muscles, will deteriorate over time. So you might be able to mentally do the task, but physically you'll be held back. That can be very frustrating because you might know how to do it and you can do it in your head because you've maintained that virtual reality aspect of it, but your actual muscles, your physical body can't accomplish the task. And so in this case, a period of time to regain the muscle strength and the muscle control is required. So what does all of this mean for us drummers? Well, there are a lot of factors that can go into this, a lot of factors that can determine how much skill we lose and how we lose it and what gets lost. So I've narrowed this into 5 factors. We're gonna go through these and hopefully they'll make sense. Number 1, how long have you been playing the drums? If you've been playing for 10 years and you take a few months off, chances are you'll get back on the kit and you won't really have lost any skill. You'll still be able to play the same grooves and even have the same coordination that you had before. Because you spent 10 years of your life learning that, you're not gonna just lose that over 3 months. On the other hand though, if you've only been playing the drums for 3 months and then you take 3 months off, well, in that amount of time, you very well could totally lose what you spent 3 months working on. Because again, that first point we had earlier about the time it takes to lose the skill being proportional to the time it took to learn it, you very well could lose it in those 3 months. Factor 2. How well were your drumming skills developed before you took the break? Let's say you've been playing drums on and off for a while, but you're not totally confident behind the kit and you don't have your coordination totally together and things are a little shaky. You're an okay drummer, but then you take 3 months off. Well, that 3 months might be all you need to really just train wreck your playing, because in those 3 months you might totally lose what you were kind of gaining but hadn't totally perfected and become confident in. It's safe to say that partially learned, not confident skills that are shaky and not very good, those will be lost very quickly. On the other hand, if you're a solid player who is very confidently, intentionally, solidly executing everything you play, it's gonna take much longer to lose that. Factor number 3, how immersed in drumming and music are you? How often do you listen to music? Do you find yourself playing grooves and fills and parts in your head all the time? This is where that virtual reality thing comes in. Say you've got to spend a month away from the kit, but you're listening to music all the time and you're hearing drum parts and fills, and you're letting those parts play in your head and really marinate in your mind and your musical mind, and you're hearing these parts playing all the time, you're envisioning yourself playing them, well, that is really great mental practice, and believe it or not, that goes a long way toward maintaining that coordination and that skill, so that your brain is still actively doing that even though your physical body isn't. So when you get back at the kit, you might be able to just pick up where you left off. You might have to regain a little bit of that muscle memory, a little bit of that control, the muscle loss that can happen, but after you do that, you'll be right on top of your game. Factor number 4, what technical level was your playing at? What kind of techniques, whether it be finger, wrist, hand, whatever, what kind of techniques were you employing in your playing? Like we said earlier, and just now, actual muscle strength and that muscle technique and control is the first thing to go. So after an extended time of not playing, most likely your doubles are going to suffer a little because your finger control is going to suffer a bit, and it's possible that smooth wrist technique won't be so great either. Chances are the precise method in which you've learned to hold your sticks that allows for maximum ease, control, fluidity, smoothness, etc., that's probably going to deteriorate slightly, and so you're going to find that you have to really focus in and re-smoothen out your playing again. Your leg strength, foot strength, arm strength, back strength, your posture, that could also suffer a little bit just because you haven't been actively using those muscles. But this whole thing about technique and smoothness and fluidity and solidness, that leads to our final point about our hearing. How high of a musical standard do you hold yourself to? How acute is your hearing? How well do you listen? And how much attention to detail do you employ in your music? Remember that point a minute ago about losing the skill over time to finally execute a skill? Well, you might be able to sit down at the drums 20 years later and still play a groove and still play some fills and play along with a song, maybe no problem, but how well will that groove and those fills and that song actually sound and feel when we really get down into the nitty-gritty of it? Thing is though, perhaps you've never held yourself to that high level of metronomic perfection or that high level of solidness and feel and dynamics in your playing. So it's very possible you could come back decades later and play and not actually notice that anything's gone downhill. Or maybe your hearing has deteriorated over the years of not really doing any music, however long this time period has been, And so you could lose the ability to perceive these details in your playing. So that's the other side to this. Your ear might fail you here, and you don't notice the things that have gone downhill. So to sum up this final point, your ear will play a huge factor in the amount of perceived lost skill. A good ear will tell you exactly what you've lost. But if you never developed your ear in the first place, you might not even notice the lost skill. You certainly can lose your skill as a drummer. It can happen. How long it takes to lose that skill, though, can vary from person to person, player to player, and can depend on a lot of factors, as I've shown you here. It's safe to say that within just a week or so, any drummer can lose a little bit of that mental acuteness necessary to play at his A game, but regaining it might only take a few minutes. On the other hand, taking a few years or decades off can have a huge impact on your playing, but that all depends on how long you were playing before that, and at what level you had your playing, and even what level you had your ear trained at that point in time. But keep in mind that the more engaged you keep your mind in music and in drumming during that off time, the less of a difficult transition there will be getting back into it later after the time off. That whole virtual reality thing can sound silly, but it's very true because drumming is such a mental thing. But moral of the story here, guys, keep practicing. Try to not take long breaks. Keep practicing, keep it all fresh in your head. It is very true, use your skills or lose your skills to a degree. But if you have to be away from the kit for a long time, listen to music, do the mental practicing. I hope this has taught you something. I hope this has gotten you thinking about these things, and maybe you've experienced a lot of these instances where you've taken breaks away from the kit. So I'd really like to hear from you in the comments. Tell me about your experiences, whether it's taking a few days off or weeks or months or years, and what it was like when you came back and played for the first time again. And if this was your first time checking out the Non-Glamorous Drummer and you're interested in all these nitty-gritty tips and tricks about drumming and maintaining our drum skill, I hope I've earned your subscription. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I will see you on the next video.